Hello, friends. Thought I'd give you a sunset to watch with me tonight. When people first go out into the forest to learn a new wild edible plant, let's see a fungi, oyster mushrooms, and they go out into the woods, they identify it, they train their mind to be able to see it. And then very often you will hear from that person in the coming weeks, "Oh my gosh, the forest is full of oyster mushrooms. I see them everywhere I look." Now it could be that the universe rearranges itself to give us something once we learn it. But it could just as easily be that when we train our mind to look for something, we then see it. And this is very obvious with wild edible plants. Whatever you learn, you're going to start seeing them everywhere. Think about this for a moment as it relates to the way that media, the internet, trains our minds, what we are trained to see. So for a large part, at least when I look around the internet kind of randomly, I am going to see a lot of things that are fear-based. In Dune, Frank Herbert said, "Fear is the mind killer." And that's not really an exaggeration. We are being fed a diet of fear unless we consciously direct our mind in a different direction. But basically what's happening is that without having enrolled in the class to our knowledge, without consciously paying for the class, we are all in a class being taught not how to see oyster mushrooms, but how to see fear in the world. And the media, so many internet sources, they are giving us this class, these lessons in fear. Now, why? Because fear, it takes us over. It kind of kills our mind and our ability to think and draws us to just see more fear. Once we become fear-based, we desire more and more of that diet. It's very addictive. And so, essentially, fear sells. If a news source or YouTube channel or whatever it is can keep you fearful, you're going to keep coming back and feeding that addiction. Now, you all know me. I consider myself to have a decently well-trained mind. I meditate regularly, mindfulness practices. In general, if a thought that I am not looking for, an anxiety or fear arises in my mind, I can dismiss it. However, I will tell you right now, if I sit down for a day to a diet of any of the major news sources, or I sit down to a diet of many of the YouTube channels that have flashy fear-based headlines, in a very short order, my mind will start to be overwhelmed by that fear. And all of my training, all of my mental strength, it has trouble with that. It's because this stuff is very, very well designed. It's very well designed to keep us fearful. And I've heard from many of you, I'm assuming that many of you can relate to this. There's an anxiety that can feel like it's become normal and commonplace in today's world. Because as we're fed that steady diet of fear, it builds into a normalcy. We adapt to it until that fear is our normal way of seeing the world. And then when we look around ourselves, we see it everywhere. Now the thing is, likely the oyster mushrooms were always out there for that person. They've walked through the woods many times. They've seen a white mushroom on a tree. There's lots of mushrooms on trees, and walked right by. It didn't exist for them, even though it was there. It's the same for the bad things of the world. All through human history, it is very likely that there have been a lot of bad things happening all over the world. That's probably normal. The only difference today is that we can see it. We have these technologies, the internet, the television, the way that information can be moved around the earth so that we are able to see it. And we can sit down and we can intake a steady diet of all the bad things that were always happening before, but now we can see them. And that is where it can become overwhelming. Now, it may not be bad that we can see all of these bad things, because for the first time in human history, we may be aware as a species of how much bad stuff is going on in the world. And that may, if we are really intelligent animals and we move into a more conscious way of living as a species, it may mean that we can look and we can see, oh, yeah, there are some problems that maybe could be remedied, that could be shifted. And so if we look at it that way, as a means to show us the world's problems and give us entrance into solving them, then it can be a good thing. But the reality for you, for me, for most of us, is that this stuff comes into our consciousness and there's nothing for us to do with it. The most we can do is sit and say angry words about our government, or write a few comments into a forum or onto the comments of a video about how corrupt things are. That's not solving a problem. It's just sitting and stewing in our own fear and our own anxiety. See what this does to us? You've heard me speak about this before, but I bring it up because it's so vital. This has an enormously powerful impact on the quality of our life. And I live around some people who don't really tune into that. Don't even really know what's going on in the news. And they live largely free of those fears and anxieties. And it's very likely that our world will continue to go on and have these ups and downs that it always historically has had. But in a localized environment, for that person down the street, they are getting their seeds together that they're going to be planting in the spring. And they're going about their lives as they always have. And the important thing for them is not to be stewing in fear about something that's far, far away, but to be being a good neighbor to the person that they live next to taking some of the food that they grow and giving it to somebody who might need some food. And that is the place we can make an impact, right here in our localized life. We can solve the problems that we have the power to solve. And when we do that, then we change a little teeny bit of the world. And that's all the world is made up of, is all these little bits coming together into a beautiful self-organizing whole. But you, the way you live today, the way your mind thinks, what you feel, that is your little portion of this whole that you're in charge of. And it's your responsibility. And I don't say that to be mean. But if we would all say, this little portion is my responsibility, how can I take part in this portion in a way that makes it the best little part that it can be in the whole? This world could become a very different place. So that's the call this evening for me. I'm not sure when you're watching this, but the call that I'm putting out is, can we all say, I'm going to be responsible for this little part of the world that I'm in. And that little part is kind of bigger than you may think. It probably doesn't extend out to what's happening in countries far away, disasters that you're unable to help with. But it starts with your mental state. Are you in a mind state that is compassionate, that is caring, that is concerned about giving yourself what you need to nurture you, but just as concerned with the welfare of those in your immediate circles? And then out into your community, the ways you can interact with your community in ways that bring more beauty, more compassion, more light to the people a couple steps removed from you. If we think that far out, that's a place where we actually have power to change, and that little circle starts to get bigger. Because remember, when you affect somebody positively, when you meet somebody on the street and you greet them with compassion, with aloha, with warmth, with namaste, with saying, I recognize you as a fellow human being. You and I may have very different thoughts about the world. We may have different religions. We may have different cultural backgrounds. Whatever our differences are, we're also human beings on the planet together, and I can recognize you in that fellowship, in that sisterhood, that brotherhood that we share. Then, wow, I've changed that person a little bit. And I've instilled a little tiny bit of compassion in them. That's where we can actually make change. That's where we can actually make change. That's the power we have in this world. And it is not a little power. In fact, when we start thinking this way, when we turn off the fear in our minds and we start seeing the world compassionately, the world starts to look very, very different. It's almost as if you can talk to two people and they live in completely different worlds. And it is not necessarily that the world is different, but that their perception of the world is different. You see this? If I look at something, and if I look at a dog, and I see that dog as a dangerous, horrible thing, what is the interaction? What world am I creating there? Inside of myself and in my actual relationship with that dog. If I look at that dog and I see an animal that I know that I can understand its body language, its communication, and I know how to communicate back with that dog, then I can see that dog and there's a completely different reality right there. So this matters. It matters a lot. And the more we can immerse ourselves in a more positive reality, the more we're going to see a more positive reality blossom around us. My friends, each one of you is a world changer. And you don't have to go out and protest or volunteer or anything else to be a world changer. You're changing the world right now by who you are and what your mind state is. So, right now, this is the moment to become and blossom into the most loving, compassionate creature you can be. To take the fear that so many would love to feed into your mind, would love to make you addicted to, so that you come back again and again to their fear. And to say, no, thank you. I don't need that fear anymore. That's not something I need to feed into my mind. And to start to create in your mind that peacefulness. My friends, thank you for being here for the sunset with me. I usually am standing the other way and watching it. But I'm seeing the moon in the sky, and through the screen, through the video, I'm getting to see the sunset as well. Looks like it was a beautiful one. I am very grateful for you, for what you bring into the world, for what you bring to my family. Because so many of you take the time to write down in the comments, to share your sentiments and your thoughts and your ideas with us. Some of you write us emails. Some of you become our patrons. Some of you send us things in the mail. In so many ways, you uplift our lives. You make our lives richer. So this is a thank you to you. Even if you're just watching silently, you've never commented. You give something to us when you do that. So tonight, I want to say thank you. I want to say I love you. I want to express my gratitude for what you bring to my life, to my family's life, and to the world. And I'm hoping that tomorrow, when I wake up, I can be a little more compassionate, a little more open-minded, a little more curious, a little more thoughtful. And I'm hoping that you will join me in that. And tomorrow, the world will be a little bit more of a beautiful place, because we've all done that together. Love you all. Now I'll talk with you in the comments. I know this is terrible for the algorithms, because I believe you're rewarded for people watching your entire video. And how many people are going to sit through a sunset? But I think some of you may join me. And you know what? I'm not really concerned about the algorithms. Just concerned about the connection between you and me, between us. So anybody that wants to, I invite you to watch the rest of the sunset. Well, just a little bit more of it with me. And maybe I'll do a little shakuhachi.